This is harder than I thought.
The hardest steps are the first ones.
I'm glad you're with me.
Always.
The first time the town laughed at her. The wind carried the sound across the dusty street like it was part of the morning church bell. Lilian Hartwell stood beside a wagon painted in faded blue, her hands steady, her eyes calm, while whispers moved from porch to porch. The people of Red Hollow had always believed they understood the world. They believed in silver coins, polished boots, and family names carved into wooden signs above storefronts. They did not believe in love that did not fit inside their narrow expectations. And they certainly did not believe that a woman like Lilian would choose to marry a poor giant Apache named Cale Thunderstone. Cale was impossible to ignore. He stood taller than the men who mocked him, his broad shoulders casting long shadows on the boardwalk. His presence filled a room without a single word, yet he wore simple clothes, stitched carefully by his own hands, and worked hard for every meal he placed on the table. He did not speak much in public. Silence was his shield. But when he looked at Lilian, his gaze softened in a way that made her feel like the only person in the entire territory. That look was the reason she had said yes when he asked her to marry him under the wide sky beyond town limits. Red Hollow had expected her to choose someone like Whitaker Hale, the bank owner's son, who strutted through town with a shining watch and a practiced smile. Whitaker had proposed with flowers imported from another state and promises delivered in loud confidence, but Lilian had refused him with quiet grace. She had chosen Cale instead. That decision turned her life into a storm of ridicule. Women in lace dresses turned their heads when she passed. Men laughed behind their hands. Some called her foolish. Others called her desperate. A few even whispered that she had been tricked, but Lilian did not flinch. She had grown up on the edge of hardship, raising younger siblings after her father's passing. She understood strength. She saw it in Cale's steady hands and patient heart. She saw it in the way he treated strangers with respect, even when they did not return the kindness. Their wedding had been small, no grand hall, no orchestra, just a clearing near the river, decorated with wildflowers and sunlight. Cale's friend stood quietly at a distance, proud but restrained. Lilian wore a simple ivory dress sewn by her own mother's friend. When they exchanged vows, the river seemed to pause. For a brief moment, even the critics felt the beauty of it. Still, the town did not forgive them. Business owners refused to sell to Cale. Children were warned not to speak to him. Rumors spread like prairie fire. The loudest of them all claimed that Cale was poor and unworthy, that Lilian would regret her choice once reality settled in. Whitaker Hale made sure those rumors remained alive, smiling in public while fueling doubt in private conversations. Lilian and Cale moved into a modest cabin at the edge of town. It was built with care but lacked luxury. They planted a small garden. Cale repaired fences for neighbors who paid him less than fair wages. Lilian worked as a seamstress, stitching garments late into the night. Together they managed, never complaining. Their home was filled with laughter in the evenings and quiet dreams at dawn. But something about Cale always felt deeper than what the town saw. He traveled often to distant lands under the pretense of trade, returning with simple explanations. He avoided discussing details. When asked about his past, he changed the subject with calm patience. Lilian trusted him completely, yet sometimes she noticed how town officials glanced at him with unexpected caution, as if they sensed something beneath the surface. One afternoon a stranger arrived in Red Hollow. He wore a dark coat and carried documents sealed with unfamiliar marks. The stranger asked for Cale Thunderstone by name. The town watched from windows as the man approached their cabin. Whitaker Hale stood near the general store, curiosity sharpening his expression. The stranger spoke privately with Cale for several long minutes. No one could hear the words, but they saw the way Cale's posture straightened, as if recalling a long-forgotten truth. When the stranger left, he bowed respectfully before riding away. The entire town noticed that gesture. Respect was not something they had expected to see directed at the so-called poor giant Apache. Whispers began again, but this time they carried uncertainty instead of mockery. That evening, Cale returned home earlier than usual. Lilian was preparing supper when she noticed his expression. This was not sadness, nor joy, but something steady and powerful. He sat beside her and took her hands. For a moment, he said nothing. The firelight reflected in his eyes, revealing a depth she had always sensed but never fully understood. Outside, horses approached the cabin, not just one or two. Several. The sound echoed across the field. Lilian looked toward the door, her heart quickening. Cale did not move with alarm. Instead, he rose calmly, guiding her to stand beside him. A knock followed, firm but polite. Voices called his name with formal tone, not mockery. The town had gathered silently behind the visitors, watching from a distance. Whitaker Hale stood among them, his confident smile replaced by tension. Cale opened the door. What stood on the other side was not hostility, but recognition. The strangers removed their hats. They addressed Cale with titles that did not belong to a poor man. They spoke of lands, of investments, of properties stretching far beyond Red Hollow. They spoke of a hidden fortune entrusted to him years ago, carefully protected and multiplied through wise decisions. They spoke of accounts that even the bank could not ignore. The town gasped. Lilian felt the world shift beneath her feet. Cale's hand tightened around hers, grounding her. Whitaker stepped forward, disbelief written across his face. The documents were displayed openly. Signatures matched. Records confirmed. Cale Thunderstone was not the poor giant they had mocked. He was the rightful owner of extensive holdings and resources that reached across territories. His silence had not been weakness. It had been protection. The strangers asked for his decision on what to do next. They waited respectfully. Cale looked at Lilian before answering. His voice, deep and steady, carried across the yard. He did not speak of revenge. He did not mention humiliation. Instead, he announced that he would use his resources to build schools, improve roads, and create fair work for the people of Red Hollow, including those who had laughed at him. The crowd murmured in shock. Whitaker's expression darkened, but he said nothing. As lanterns flickered and the wind carried new tension through the streets, Lilian realized that their lives would never be the same again. The town that once mocked her now watched with cautious anticipation. Some felt shame, others felt curiosity, and a few felt fear of change. Cale turned toward the gathering darkness beyond the field. His hidden fortune had changed everything, yet his heart remained unchanged. He squeezed Lilian's hand and whispered that this was only the beginning. In that moment, Lilian understood that the real story was not about wealth or ridicule. It was about truth waiting to be revealed. But as the visitors prepared to return the next morning with official confirmation and town leaders gathered in restless debate, one question remained in the air. Would Red Hollow accept the giant Apache they had mocked? Or would pride push them toward a decision that could divide the town forever? And as the cabin lights glowed softly in the distance, someone unseen watched from the edge of the trees, holding a secret that could either strengthen their future or threaten it in ways no one yet imagined. The morning after the visitors arrived, Red Hollow did not wake up in the same way. The sun rose over the dusty rooftops, but the town felt heavier, as if every window held a question. People gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices. Some pretended not to care. Others could not hide their curiosity. The news about Cale Thunderstone spread faster than any rumor had before, and with it came confusion. For years, the town had believed a simple story about him. They thought he was a wandering giant with little money and fewer connections. They assumed his strength was his only value. That belief had made it easy to mock him and easier to ignore Lilian Hartwell when she chose him. Now, that story no longer fit, and when people are forced to change what they believe, fear often follows. Inside their cabin, Lilian sat at the wooden table, her hands resting around a warm cup of tea. Cale stood near the window, watching the road. His expression remained steady, but his silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of a man hiding from the world. It was the silence of a man thinking carefully about it. Lilian finally broke the quiet. She asked him how long he had known about the fortune mentioned by the strangers. Cale turned to her slowly. His eyes held warmth, but also a hint of distance. He explained that years ago, long before they met, he had trusted a small group of advisors to manage land and trade on his behalf. He had chosen to live simply, believing wealth should not control a person's spirit. The fortune had grown quietly, protected by agreements and careful planning. He did not sound proud when he spoke. He sounded thoughtful. Lilian listened closely, realizing that his life had always carried layers she had not fully seen. She felt no anger, Instead, she felt respect. Yet she also sensed that something about this revelation had stirred more than admiration in town. Outside, Whitaker Hale stood on the steps of the bank speaking with the town council. His voice carried frustration, though he tried to hide it behind polite words. The bank had already received official notice regarding Cale's holdings. That notice meant power, influence, and potential changes in local leadership. Whitaker understood what that could mean for his own position. He had built his reputation on being the most successful man in Red Hollow. Now that claim felt unstable. Meanwhile, the visitors who had arrived the day before had not left completely. They remained in town, meeting quietly with officials. Their documents required verification. They asked questions about local roads, land boundaries, and trade routes. The conversation suggested that Cale's fortune was not just private wealth. It involved land rights and development plans that could reshape the region. Word of this spread quickly. Some residents felt hope, imagining better schools and stronger businesses. So others worried about change. Red Hollow had always valued tradition. The idea that a man they once called poor might influence the town's future unsettled them deeply. Lilian noticed the shift when she walked to the market that afternoon. Conversations stopped when she approached. Some women avoided her eyes. A few offered nervous smiles. One elderly shopkeeper who had once refused to sell to Cale now spoke to her with careful politeness. The difference was clear. Wealth had changed their tone, but not their memories. Back at the cabin, Cale received another letter delivered by horseback. The messenger would not speak beyond confirming the sender. Cale read the letter alone before placing it inside a locked drawer. Lilian asked what it contained, but he only said it required patience. His calm response did not reduce her curiosity. If anything, it increased it. That evening, a meeting was announced at the town hall. All residents were invited. The purpose was to discuss future development and financial partnerships. Cale and Lilian were asked to attend as honored guests. The invitation surprised many people, especially Whitaker Hale, who had assumed he would lead any such discussion. As night fell, the town hall filled quickly. Lanterns lit the wooden walls. Faces reflected anticipation and tension. Cale entered with Lilian by his side. He wore a simple dark coat, but he carried himself differently than before. Not in arrogance, but in quiet authority. When he walked, the room seemed to adjust around him. Whitaker stood near the front, his posture stiff. When the meeting began, officials explained that Cale's resources could support new roads connecting Red Hollow to larger trade routes. This would bring opportunity, but also require cooperation. Taxes, contracts, and responsibilities would shift. The town would need to decide how to proceed. As discussions continued, opinions grew divided. Some residents supported the idea. Others questioned it. Whispers moved across the room like shifting wind. Through it all, Cale remained composed. He did not interrupt. He waited for his turn. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and clear. He explained that his intention was not to control Red Hollow, but to invest in it. He described plans for fair employment, local training programs, and improved infrastructure. He emphasized that decisions would involve the community. His words were simple, but they carried weight. Lilian watched him as he spoke. She saw determination in his expression, but also care. This was not the same man who had stood quietly on the edge of town months ago. He had always possessed strength. Now that strength had a different form. Yet not everyone was satisfied. Whitaker raised concerns about transparency and influence. He questioned whether outside advisors were truly acting in the town's best interest. His tone was controlled, but sharp. The room grew quiet again. Cale met his gaze without anger. The tension between them was visible, though no harsh words were exchanged. Instead, the discussion shifted to formal review processes. Documents would be examined. Agreements would be evaluated. Nothing would move forward without approval. That should have settled the atmosphere, but it did not. Outside the hall, a sudden commotion drew attention. A carriage had arrived unexpectedly. Its driver demanded immediate entry, claiming urgent matters related to the newly revealed assets. Town guards hesitated, unsure how to respond. Lilian felt her heartbeat quicken. Cale placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, but his eyes turned toward the door with focused intensity. The meeting paused as footsteps approached from the entrance. The hall doors opened slowly. A figure stepped inside, holding another sealed envelope. The person requested to speak privately with Cale. The tone was serious. The crowd sensed that whatever this message contained might shift everything once more. Whitaker watched carefully. The town waited in silence. Cale moved forward to receive the envelope, his expression unreadable. Lilian stood beside him, feeling that whatever truth lay inside could redefine not only their future, but Red Hollow itself. As Cale broke the seal, the lantern light flickered slightly, and the room held its breath. Unaware of what the next words would reveal, as the envelope rested in Cale Thunderstone's hands, the entire hall felt suspended in time. The paper was thick, the seal pressed deep with an unfamiliar emblem. Cale did not open it immediately. He studied it first, as if the weight of the message could be measured by touch alone. Lilian Hartwell stood close enough to see the faint tightening in his jaw. Something she had learned meant he was thinking carefully, not fearing. The crowd watched in silence. Whitaker Hale leaned forward slightly, pretending indifference while clearly listening to every movement. The town council members exchanged uneasy glances. Red Hollow had always handled disputes through open meetings, simple votes, and familiar names. Now, with outside advisors and hidden fortunes involved, the situation felt larger than anyone expected. Cale finally broke the seal. His eyes moved across the page without haste. Lilian tried to read his expression, searching for any hint. When he finished, he folded the letter slowly and placed it back inside the envelope. He did not speak right away. The pause stretched longer than comfort allowed. The stranger who delivered it cleared his throat and requested permission to explain. Cale nodded once. The messenger announced that certain claims had been questioned. There were concerns about competing interests tied to the land holdings. Some parties, he said carefully, believed the recent announcement could affect long-standing agreements. An official review had been requested. Lilian felt the shift in the room. It was no longer just about wealth. It was about influence, power, and trust. Cale's hidden fortune had awakened attention from people far beyond Red Hollow. The town had thought the matter would end with simple recognition. Instead, it seemed to open a wider conflict. After the meeting, the hall emptied slowly. Residents spoke in clusters outside under lantern light. Some worried that development would raise costs and change their way of life. Others hoped new investment would bring jobs and respect to their quiet town. Red Hollow was divided not by anger alone, but by uncertainty about the future. Back at the cabin, Cale placed the envelope on the table, but did not open it again. Lilian asked him if the review could threaten their plans. He answered honestly that it could pause everything until the situation was clarified. He admitted that when wealth grows quietly, it can attract attention from those who prefer control. His tone remained calm, but Lilian sensed the seriousness behind his words. She reminded him that their marriage had never been about money. Cale smiled gently at that, said he knew that, but others might not believe it. In towns like Red Hollow, reputation traveled faster than truth. Now that his fortune was public knowledge, people would form new opinions quickly. The next morning, unexpected visitors arrived again. This time, they were not formal advisors. They were representatives from a regional development firm. They requested a private discussion with Cale. The town watched from windows as the group entered the cabin. Whitaker observed from across the street. He appeared thoughtful, though no one could guess what he was planning. His position as bank leader placed him in a sensitive role. If Cale chose to work with outside firms, financial control within Red Hollow might shift. That possibility concerned him deeply. Inside the cabin, the representatives presented proposals. They spoke of partnerships, investment shares, and long-term contracts. They suggested that Cale allow them partial management authority in exchange for rapid expansion and guaranteed returns. Their language was polished and confident, yet their eyes carried calculation. Cale listened without interruption. Lilian noticed how carefully he reviewed every detail. He asked questions about transparency, community involvement, and long-term impact. The representatives answered smoothly, but avoided direct commitments regarding local decision-making. When they left, the atmosphere inside the cabin felt heavier than before. Cale admitted that some offers might appear attractive on the surface. Fast growth could bring immediate benefits, but he worried about losing independence. Lilian understood his concern. She knew he valued dignity more than display. Meanwhile, tensions in town continued to rise. A group of residents approached the council requesting clarity about future plans. They wanted assurance that local voices would remain important. Others, influenced by Whitaker's subtle remarks, argued that rapid development might threaten traditional values. The conflict was no longer personal. It had expanded into a debate about identity and direction. Red Hollow stood at a crossroads. Cale's hidden fortune had not simply changed his life. It had placed the entire town in a position of transformation. Lilian noticed something else growing quietly. Not everyone viewed her with mockery anymore. Some women approached her respectfully, asking about her experience with Cale. They were curious, not judgmental. A few admitted they had misunderstood him. These small interactions showed that opinions were beginning to shift, though not completely. However, deeper currents remained unsettled. Now Whitaker Hale called for another council session. He proposed establishing a town committee to oversee all negotiations connected to the new assets. His suggestion sounded reasonable, but it also positioned him at the center of decision-making. Whether this was protective or strategic, no one could be certain. Cale agreed to attend the session. He did not refuse oversight. Instead, he expressed willingness to cooperate, provided the process remained fair. His response surprised some critics. They had expected resistance. Instead, he offered transparency. Still, rumors continued. Some claimed that the external business group had interests beyond simple development. Others speculated that financial records might contain clauses not yet revealed. The uncertainty made trust fragile. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Lilian and Cale walked near the river where they had once exchanged vows. The water moved steadily, reflecting soft gold light. Lilian asked him if he regretted revealing the fortune publicly. Cale paused before answering. He said that hiding wealth had protected him, but sharing it had revealed the truth. Now people could see clearly, even if the vision was uncomfortable. As they stood there, a distant horse approached along the road. The rider slowed near the cabin, speaking briefly with Cale before handing him another sealed document. The rider left without explanation. Cale opened the letter slowly, reading in silence. Lilian watched his face carefully. She noticed a slight change in his expression, something between concern and resolve. He folded the paper again, holding it firmly. When she asked what it contained, he replied that certain claims had escalated. A formal inquiry was being prepared. The word inquiry echoed in her thoughts. It suggested scrutiny, records, and possible legal examination. Nothing was confirmed yet, but the tone had shifted. What began as celebration now carried complexity. Inside Red Hollow, alliances were forming quietly. Some residents believed Cale would bring progress. Others feared outside influence. Whitaker continued to move carefully between both sides, speaking of stability while maintaining control over financial discussions. As night settled, lanterns glowed across town. Conversations continued in homes and shops. The giant Apache who had once been mocked now stood at the center of attention, yet the outcome remained unclear. Lilian felt both pride and concern. She loved the strength of the man beside her, but she knew challenges were building from multiple directions. Cale placed the latest document inside the drawer with the first envelope. He locked it gently. Then he looked at Lilian with quiet determination. Whatever was coming next would require patience, unity, and courage. Outside, the wind moved through Red Hollow again, carrying whispers of change. And somewhere beyond the town limits, decisions were being made that would soon test everything Cale and Lilian believed about trust, loyalty, and the true meaning of wealth. The days that followed felt longer than usual in Red Hollow. Every sunrise, carried quiet tension, and every sunset seemed to whisper that something important was about to happen. Cale Thunderstone continued to attend meetings with calm determination, but it was clear that the inquiry was moving forward. Official letters arrived at the town hall, stamped and precise, requesting financial documents, land records, and proof of ownership. The hidden fortune that had once been a private matter was now under public examination. Lilian Hartwell stood beside Cale through it all. She noticed how people looked at him differently now. Some eyes showed respect, others still carried doubt. A few even showed envy. Wealth had changed the conversation, but it had also raised questions about power and influence. The town had never faced a situation like this before, and uncertainty spread through shops, homes, and the bank. Whitaker Hale became more active during this time. He held private discussions with council members, speaking about responsibility and stability. He argued that rapid development could disrupt the town's balance. His words sounded reasonable, yet his tone suggested urgency. Some residents began to wonder whether he feared losing his position as the central financial authority in Red Hollow. Meanwhile, the External Development Group requested another meeting with Cale. They arrived in formal attire, carrying revised agreements. This time their proposal was more direct. They suggested a partnership that would give them stronger oversight in exchange for accelerating investment. They emphasized efficiency and growth, promising immediate expansion of roads, schools, and trade routes. Cale listened carefully. He asked detailed questions about decision-making rights and long-term control. The representatives answered with polished confidence, but their responses lacked clarity regarding community input. Lilian observed every exchange. She sensed that the conversation was no longer just about business. It was about who would shape the future of Red Hollow. At the end of the meeting, Cale did not sign anything. He thanked them politely and requested time to review the documents with independent counsel. The representatives agreed, though their expressions suggested impatience. When they left, a heavy silence filled the cabin. That night, Cale and Lilian sat near the fireplace. The fire crackled softly while the wind moved outside. Lilian admitted that she felt the pressure growing around them. She was proud of Cale's strength and honesty, but she worried about the forces gathering beyond their control. Cale held her hands and told her that truth would protect them. His voice was steady, yet there was an intensity in his eyes that showed he understood the stakes. The following morning, a town announcement declared that a final hearing would take place in 1 week. All parties involved in the inquiry would present their positions. The decision would influence land agreements, financial partnerships, and development rights. The hearing would determine whether Cale's fortune would proceed under local oversight or under external partnership. Red Hollow became restless. Conversations grew louder. Some residents prepared statements supporting Cale and his plans for fair growth. Others planned to oppose rapid expansion. The town felt divided, but deeply invested in the outcome. Whitaker organized a formal statement for the council. He emphasized transparency and protection of local interests. His speech was calm, yet firm. He avoided criticizing Cale directly, but his message implied caution. It was clear that the hearing would not be simple. During this period, Lilian noticed something unusual. A small group of townspeople approached her privately. They admitted that they had judged her unfairly when she chose Cale. They expressed gratitude for his kindness and generosity since the fortune became known. Some had already benefited from small improvements funded quietly by Cale's advisors. These quiet changes included repairs to public buildings and support for local workers. However, the External Development Group appeared to be growing impatient. Rumors suggested that if the hearing did not favor their proposal, they might withdraw support entirely. That possibility created fear among those who hoped for faster progress. The tension between independence and partnership became the central conflict. On the evening before the hearing preparations intensified, Cale received one more sealed message. It contained notice that certain documents would be challenged during the session. The challenge questioned the authenticity of past agreements. This new development introduced uncertainty that could delay everything further. Cale read the notice quietly. Lilian watched him closely. She could see that the situation was becoming more complicated. If the challenge succeeded, it could affect the structure of his holdings. If it failed, the town might still face pressure from outside forces. That night, Cale walked alone toward the edge of town. Lilian followed at a distance, wanting to give him space, but also wishing to stay close. She saw him standing under the open sky, looking toward the horizon. The giant Apache who had once been mocked now carried responsibility that stretched far beyond personal wealth. The weight of expectation surrounded him. Meanwhile, Whitaker met privately with several council members. His tone was measured, but his concern was clear. He suggested that the town prepare contingency plans in case the partnership failed. He did not accuse anyone, yet he emphasized the importance of readiness. His leadership role was becoming more visible as the hearing approached. The tension reached a higher level when the external development group requested immediate temporary authority pending the hearing outcome. This request would allow them to begin preliminary work before the final decision. Some officials considered the proposal, others hesitated, recognizing that granting temporary authority could shift power dramatically. Cale refused to agree without full community approval. His stance was firm yet respectful. He explained that any action affecting Red Hollow must involve its people. His words resonated with many residents, but they also increased pressure from those who favored swift action. As the hearing day approached, the town felt charged with anticipation. Lanterns were prepared, documents were organized, witnesses were scheduled. Every conversation seemed to circle around the same question about trust, ownership, and future direction. Lilian stood beside Cale the evening before the hearing. She looked into his eyes and felt both love and anxiety. Their marriage had survived ridicule and misunderstanding. Now it faced a test that involved more than emotion. It involved community, identity, and financial power. Cale placed a gentle hand on her cheek and promised that whatever happened, they would face it together. His confidence comforted her, yet she knew that the upcoming hearing would bring the most intense moment of their journey so far. As dawn began to approach, Red Hollow remained awake in many homes. People prepared themselves for a decision that could reshape the town. Outside the cabin, the wind moved steadily, carrying uncertainty through the streets. The stage was set for the climax. The inquiry would begin soon, voices would rise, documents would be examined, and the truth about the hidden fortune would stand before the entire town. Everyone waited, knowing that the next hours would determine whether Red Hollow moved toward unity and growth or deeper division. The story had reached its most critical point, and the outcome was still hidden in the silence before the hearing began. The hearing began under a bright morning sky, with the entire town of Red Hollow gathered inside the town hall. The room felt different from the last meeting. This time there was no loud laughter, no casual judgment. Instead, there was focus, nervous energy, and a shared understanding that something important was about to be decided. Cale Thunderstone stood at the front beside Lilian Hartwell. His presence was calm but powerful. Did not try to dominate the room, he simply waited. Lilian felt proud of him, not because of the hidden fortune, but because of his steady character during every challenge. The love they shared had already survived ridicule, doubt, and pressure. Now it would face its final test. The council opened the session by reviewing all documents connected to the land holdings and the financial assets. Whitaker Hale spoke clearly about the need for transparency and fairness. His voice was firm, yet respectful. For the first time, he did not speak from competition. He spoke as a leader concerned about the future of Red Hollow. The external development representatives presented their case next, explained their interest in regional growth, and how their partnership could bring resources. However, during questioning, it became clear that their proposal required significant control over decision-making. The town listened carefully as details unfolded. Cale then stepped forward. When he spoke, the room became quiet. He did not raise his voice. He did not express anger. Instead, he explained the full history of his fortune. He described how it had been built through patient investments, trusted advisors, and careful planning long before he arrived in Red Hollow. He clarified that the wealth was legally his, but he had never intended to use it for personal power. He told the town that his dream was simple. He wanted growth that benefited everyone, not just outside partners. He wanted better roads, improved schools, fair jobs, and strong local leadership. He emphasized that any development should protect the identity and independence of Red Hollow. Lilian stood beside him as he spoke. Her presence reminded everyone that this story was not only about money, it was about marriage, trust, and partnership. The town had mocked her for marrying a poor giant apache, believing she had made a mistake. Now they saw that her choice was not about wealth. It was about character. After careful discussion, the council requested a private review of the documents one final time. The process lasted several hours. Outside, townspeople waited anxiously. Conversations were softer now. Even those who had doubted Cale felt the weight of the moment. When the council returned, the decision was announced. The external development group's request for controlling authority was declined. However, their proposal for a transparent partnership under community supervision was accepted in a revised form. This new agreement ensured that Red Hollow would remain in control of its own future, while still benefiting from responsible investment. The room filled with relieved whispers. Whitaker nodded slowly. Though he had once worried about losing influence, he now saw that the solution protected both stability and fairness. He publicly acknowledged Cale's integrity and expressed support for the community-based approach. It was not an easy moment, but it was honest. The inquiry regarding the fortune concluded with full confirmation of ownership. All documents were verified. There were no irregularities. Cale's assets were secure, and the challenge was officially resolved. The tension that had surrounded the hidden fortune finally lifted. As the meeting ended, people approached Cale and Lilian one by one. Some apologized for past words. Others offered congratulations. Even those who had remained neutral expressed respect. The giant Apache who had once been mocked now stood as a symbol of strength, patience, and wisdom. Cale did not celebrate with pride. Instead, he thanked the town for listening, promised that investments would begin gradually, with community meetings guiding every step. His focus remained on collaboration rather than control. Over the following weeks, changes began to appear in Red Hollow. The first project was repairing the main road connecting the town to neighboring trade routes. Local workers were hired at fair wages. The town school received new supplies. Small businesses experienced increased activity as trade improved. Lilian continued her seamstress work. But she also helped organize community gatherings where residents discussed ideas for improvement. Her confidence inspired other women to speak openly about their hopes for the town. The marriage that had once been mocked became a source of quiet admiration. Whitaker maintained his leadership role at the bank, but he adopted a more cooperative approach. He worked with Cale's advisors to ensure financial stability. Their relationship shifted from rivalry to professional respect. Red Hollow benefited from their combined efforts. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, the town hosted a celebration in the central square. Lanterns glowed warmly. Music played softly. Families gathered together. It was not a festival of wealth, but a celebration of unity and growth. Cale and Lilian stood at the center of the gathering. When they looked around, they saw faces that once held doubt but now held appreciation. The journey had not been easy. It had tested their love, their patience, and their courage. But it had also strengthened their bond. Cale spoke briefly to the crowd. He thanked them for believing in cooperation. He reminded everyone that true success is not measured by money alone, but by how people treat one another. His words were simple, yet deeply meaningful. Lilian added that love does not follow public opinion. She explained that choosing a partner based on character rather than status had brought her peace and happiness. Her voice carried confidence, and the town listened with respect. As the celebration continued, children ran through the square laughing. Workers discussed new opportunities. Shop owners planned expansions. The atmosphere felt hopeful and stable. Red Hollow had faced uncertainty, but it had emerged stronger. The hidden fortune had not divided the town permanently. Instead, it had revealed the importance of transparency and unity. It had tested relationships and uncovered true intentions. Through careful decisions and honest dialogue, conflict transformed into collaboration. Later that night, Cale and Lilian returned to their cabin. The fire burned gently inside. They sat together in comfortable silence. The challenges they had faced seemed distant now, replaced by gratitude. Cale looked at Lilian and said that marrying her was the greatest decision of his life. She smiled and replied that standing by him through every trial had only deepened her love. Their story was no longer about mockery or mystery. It was about partnership, resilience, and shared dreams. Outside, the wind moved softly across the land, but it no longer carried tension. It felt peaceful. Red Hollow continued to grow in the months that followed. Roads improved. Education expanded. Businesses strengthened. The partnership remained community-driven, and trust slowly replaced doubt. The town learned that assumptions can be wrong, that wealth without integrity means little, and that love grounded in respect can withstand any storm. And so, the giant Apache, once called poor, became known not for fortune alone, but for leadership, humility, and dedication to his wife and his community. Lilian's courage in choosing him inspired others to look beyond appearances. Their story became part of Red Hollow's history, told not as gossip, but as a reminder that true value lies in character and unity. The hidden fortune had changed everything, but not in the way the town expected. It did not create power over others. It created opportunity for everyone. And in the warm glow of their cabin, surrounded by a stronger town and a shared future, Cale and Lilian began the next chapter of their life together, confident that love, honesty, and community would guide them forward.